What's the most insane coincidence you've experienced? I was once mugged by 4 guys on one of the main shopping streets of Nairobi, Kenya. One of the guys had me in a chokehold, and just before I was about to pass out, they dropped me and ran. At the time, I didn't know why. 12 months later, sitting on a beach on an island in Thailand, I meet a British couple who did business in Kenya, and we started to talk about how dangerous it was getting for foreigners. They described an incident the year before of turning a corner and seeing a white guy being mugged, and a shopkeeper rescued him by hitting one of them over the head with a bat. They were in the same street, on the same day, at the exact same time I was there. It was me who they witnessed being mugged. What are the odds of randomly meeting up on a beach in Thailand a year later?
That's a wild coincidence. The whole thing sounds intense, but meeting those people a year later is just one of those strange twists in life. Makes you think about how interconnected our experiences can be. Glad you're okay though. It's crazy how a moment can resonate in such unexpected ways, like running into someone who shares that same memory. Just shows how small the world really is sometimes.
I live in Australia, and I have for almost my whole life, but I was born in Dubai. Every weekend in Dubai, my mom would take me to the Hilton Beach Club and sit me in front of the pastry chef and eat. We moved away from Dubai really early on, so I don't even remember much. Fast forward to 17 years of age. A new kid at school had just moved from a nearby town. We became friends, and we both loved cricket, and we practiced a lot together. My dad and I were giving him a lift home after we were practicing, and Dad asks, "Where were you born?" And he says, "Dubai." And the conversation continues, and I say I was too, etc. Then he says, "My parents used to be the pastry chefs at the Hilton Beach Club." And this blew me away. Here we were 16 years later, halfway across the world, and every weekend I sat in front of his parents and ate what they made for me. To this day, I still get goosebumps thinking about it. I mean, what are the chances?
That's a pretty cool coincidence. It's wild how life connects people in unexpected ways. You had that little slice of your past hanging out with someone who was tied to it. Sometimes you think a memory is just yours, but then it turns out someone else has that connection too. Makes you wonder about all the other stories and threads out there that we just don't see.
A few years ago, I into a cab heading out for the evening in downtown Toronto. Shortly after being dropped off, I realized I left my phone in the cab. I tried calling it with no luck. I called the cab company, but because I had flagged the cab and paid cash, they had no real way of knowing which cab I was in. I figured the phone was as good as gone and went about my night. Many hours later, and having moved around the city quite a bit, I am ready to call it a night, so flag another cab. Sitting in the back seat, I start to think the driver looks familiar and realize that I'm in the same cab I took earlier. He hasn't found a phone, but I start looking anyways, and sure enough, there it is, jammed in the seat. Me and my flip phone were happily reunited, only for me to put it in a washing machine 2 days later.
That's a classic story. Losing your phone is always a pain, but getting it back is a nice surprise. It's funny how things can come full circle like that, riding in the same cab. It's a reminder to be careful with your stuff. But then, putting it in the washing machine 2 days later? That's just typical. Sometimes you just can't win with technology.
An American friend of mine, by the name of Tom, took his family on vacation to check out Antarctica. He met an Australian guy named Paul on Christmas Day in Antarctica. They didn't exchange contact info. A year later, Christmas Day, they take their vacation to Machu Picchu. He is looking down at a map when he hears, "Hey Tom, how the hell are you?" It was Paul, taking his family on their annual trip as well.
That's a wild coincidence. Tom and Paul bumping into each other in such random places is a cool story. Not many people can say they met someone in Antarctica and then ran into them a year later in Peru. It's interesting how the world works sometimes. Makes you think about all the unexpected connections we have.
In high school, my friend set me up with her boyfriend's cousin. Let's call him Jack. Jack and I were walking around an amusement park, and started talking about recent family spring break vacations. Turns out, both Jack and I had been in Las Vegas during the same week. We stayed at the same hotel. The conversation changed subjects when Jack stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and said, "I saw you in Las Vegas." I thought he was full of crap. There's no way he would remember some random girl among the thousands of people there. He told me the exact place he saw me and that my sister and I were posing for a photo. We got back to my house and found the picture. There were Jack and his brother in the background.
That's a wild coincidence. You just never know how small the world can be. Running into someone you kinda know in a place like Vegas feels like a movie plot. The fact that he remembered is pretty strange though. I mean, I wouldn't expect anyone to remember me from a crowd like that. Finding that photo must have been a weird moment. Like, what are the chances? Just goes to show life's full of surprises.
When I was in grade 2, our family moved from Manitoba to Arizona for a year due to a contract my dad was working. We rented out the house fully furnished for the year. While in Arizona, we flew to Alberta one weekend. On the flight from Arizona to Alberta, I sat beside a boy my age and we started talking. It went something like this. "Me, what city are you from?" Him, "Winnipeg." Me too." Me, "What school do you go to?" Him, "School name?" Me, "Cool. I used to go there too." Me, "What street do you live on?" Him, "Street name?" Me, "I live on that street." It turns out his family was renting our house while we were gone. So I was sitting beside the boy who was sleeping in my bed while we were in Arizona.
That's a wild coincidence. You really don't expect to meet someone like that while you're away. It must have been weird to realize he was living in your house at the same time. Makes you think about how small the world is sometimes. Just sitting next to someone who's got your old life for a bit must have felt surreal. Fun story to tell later on.
When I was 13, I was on a family holiday in Venice. We were on a gondola, Venetian punt boat, touring the waterways of the city. We got halfway down a long passageway, and another gondola passes us by, carrying a man and a woman, and the punter, the man and my dad lock eyes, exclaim one another's name, and have a quick handshake as our gondolas pass. Myself, brother, and mother sit quietly, pretty stunned, while the woman on the other boat explodes with, "What? Who's that? How do you know him?" We floated off in the other direction, comparatively swag and chill. Turns out it was a guy my dad went to university with, and hadn't seen him since. They haven't even contacted one another since. It's crazy they recognize one another, considering they were both in their late 40s now, passing fleetingly on 2 gondolas in Venice.
That's a cool story. It's interesting how life sometimes throws these surprises at us. Just the randomness of running into someone you know in a crowded place like Venice is wild. Your dad must have been surprised too. I guess those connections stay with you, even after all those years. It's a nice reminder of how small the world can be. Thanks for sharing that.
About 10 years ago, I tried to get into Six Flags with a tiny keychain Swiss Army knife. It literally had a dull 1-inch blade. They told me I could either throw it away, take it to my car a mile away, or rent a locker for like $10. So I decided to hide it in the planter. I looked down and saw a big piece of bark laying in the dirt and figured it would be a good hiding place. I picked it up and found another fucking mini Swiss Army knife. I placed mine next to the first and went into the park. When I returned, the other knife was gone and a smiley face was etched into the dirt in its place.
That's kind of funny. You were just trying to sneak in a little tool, and ended up finding a second one instead. It's like the universe was playing along. Leaving yours there and finding a smiley face when you got back is a nice twist. Guess someone appreciated the trade. It's wild how those little moments stick with you. All of that over a couple of tiny knives.
My family used to take little summer vacations. One summer, I was about 7 to 8. We stayed at a campground about 4 hours from home. There were a bunch of kids there, and one day we all started playing tag. I was IT and was chasing another young boy, and when I tagged him, I pushed him too hard and he fell and broke his arm. I remember the scene vividly. Fast forward to college. I became good friends with my neighbor in the dorm, and we ended up getting a place together our sophomore year. The following year, no longer living together, we went out for a few beers and the topic of broken bones came up. I've only broken one bone, and it was my arm when I was 7. Some kid at a campground pushed me over while playing tag. It was me. Still can't believe it.
That's an interesting story. It's wild how life brings people back together like that. You don't really think about the little things when you're a kid, like how one action can have a lasting impact. It must have been a strange moment when you realized you were the kid who caused his broken arm. Just shows you never really know who you're going to run into again later on.
One time I parked, without even noticing, next to a car with the same license plate as me. I had an MA plate, she had an NH plate, both with the same 5-digit number. The weirder thing was that both of us had kept the plate as a novelty plate because the state wasn't making 5-digit plate numbers anymore, but a family member wanted to keep it. In my case, my dad wanted to keep his dad's plate.
That's a strange coincidence. It's not every day you see an identical plate number, especially with different states. The fact you both held onto the novelty plate for personal reasons adds an interesting twist. Makes you think about how small the world can be sometimes. It's a cool little story to share whenever you talk cars or unique finds.
My first semester of college, I moved out of state. I was first to move into the apartment and had a few days to myself. After orientation, I found my new roommate sitting on his bed. When I introduced myself, he asked where I was from. When I told him, he said, "I used to have a friend named Simon." I said I used to have a friend named Will. We were best friends in 1st and 2nd grade until his family moved.
It's interesting how a simple introduction can bring up old memories. Moving out of state can feel isolating, but finding common ground with your roommate helps a lot. It's funny how people can connect over mutual friends, even if those connections are years apart. It's comforting to know that friendships from childhood can still resonate, even in a completely new environment.
When I was in high school, I was aimlessly playing around our library one day. Like any large public high school, our library had literally thousands of books quietly tucked away in shelves, and rarely, if ever, touched. That day, I pulled a book at random from a shelf in the back and sat down to read it. After opening it, a slip of paper fell out, and I quickly recognized the -10 digits written on it as a phone number. I hastily read the number, and it was my older sister's number, who had graduated my high school years earlier. Someone wrote her number and tucked it away into a random book in the back, until I found it years later.
That's a cool story. Finding your sister's number like that is surprising. It kind of shows how small the world is, even in a big place like a high school library. Makes you wonder who put it there and why. It's one of those random moments that sticks with you. I bet it felt like a little connection to her, even years later. Simple but meaningful.
This coincidence is straight up sorcery. Was kayaking with my family along a river when I thought I would pull a fast one on my brother. So I yell, "Hey, look, a bald eagle," to my brother, so I can do the whole made you look game. But to my surprise, he goes, "Cool." At this point, I think he is just messing with me, so I can't say the whole made you look thing. So then I look up, and a bald eagle swoops down, catches a fish, and flies to the other side of the river. One of the most magical coincidences ever.
That's pretty wild. You tried to prank your brother but end up witnessing something cool instead. I get thinking he was just playing along. It's funny how sometimes life just throws a surprise at you when you least expect it. That whole moment must have felt surreal, like nature is in on the joke too. Funny how things can turn out when you're just trying to have a bit of fun.
I cannot decide which is weirder. One, did a summer Shakespeare thing for teenagers. Next summer, one of the assistants. Directors puts together a trip to London for a group of us. We go to London, and while visiting the Globe Theatre, we run into another kid who was in the same Shakespeare thing we all were, except he was in London for separate reasons. 2. Go out to dinner to celebrate my wife's birthday. Sat next to a couple. We start talking. The wife is also celebrating her birthday, and it's on the same day. Crazy. We hit it off and exchange information to hang out again. 2 months later, I invite them to my birthday party, and turns out the husband has the same birthday as me.
That's some strange coincidence. The Shakespeare trip sounds like a memorable experience, running into someone from the same program so far away. It's funny how life connects people like that. Then there's the birthday dinner. Meeting another couple with the same birthday must have felt a bit surreal. It's nice that you all clicked, and now you've got new friends to celebrate with. Coincidences play a weird role in our lives.
I'm an American who moved to Amsterdam some years ago, and my first year there on a random Saturday, I decided to head out for a drink. Sat down next to a cute German guy who was in town for the first time from 6 hours away, helping a friend move kind of thing, and it turns out he's doing a PhD in physics. I am doing mine in astronomy and have a physics background, so we spend maybe 10 minutes discussing our research topics when he mentions offhand how he used to study in New Zealand. I get a confused look and then get all excited. Johannes, Professor W's E&M class in Auckland, first half of 2007. Freaked him out until I explained. I was a semester abroad student in Auckland that year, and now are we only in the same class, we even did homeworks together and such. But lost touch once I left the country, with no one having a clue what happened to the other. Only to randomly run into each other 5 years later in a random bar, in a random city, on another continent. I don't know if I can ever top that one. It was pretty darn cool. Smiley face.
That's a wild coincidence. Just sitting next to someone and realizing you both had that shared experience. It must have been surprising at first. The chances of running into a classmate halfway across the world after so many years seem so slim. It's funny how life works sometimes, connecting people in unexpected ways. Moments like that just remind you how small the world really can be. Makes for a good story, too.
My aunt died young on October 3rd of 2007. On October 2nd, 2008, I was a senior in high school. I was in my art class one morning sitting at a table of 4 when the teacher tells one person from each table to go and grab a stack of newspapers for us to sculpt on so that the tables don't get all messed up with clay. Another guy spreads out the newspapers and then I begin to work. I notice that the paper in my seat is the obituary pages. I casually begin to read it and realize that the paper is a year old and the obituary listing exactly under my right hand was that of my aunt, who had died a full 365 days before. I'd like to think it was her way of saying hello and what's up, and to make sure I wasn't sculpting anything grossly sexually inappropriate.
That's a wild coincidence. Sitting there, working on art, then seeing your aunt's obituary. It's a strange mix of emotions, right? You're creating something new, and there's this reminder of loss. But I like how you think about it. Maybe it was her checking in on you. It's oddly comforting to imagine her in that moment. Just a simple reminder that our loved ones stick around in unexpected ways.
I met my now husband at work. Turns out there are enough coincidences that my mom is seriously wondering whether we are distantly related. We were born in the same hospital. 2 weeks apart, we then both moved about 500 miles away and ended up in the same university together. We moved from there another 100 miles away and worked in the same company. We both have relatives in the same area. In Dublin, we both have a relative that worked in the same hotel in Dublin. At about the same time back in the 1930s, my mom and his grandmother have the exact same combination of unusual first and middle names. I have the same birthday as his mom. We don't live in Ireland. Edit. When I say birthday, I mean month and day. I am not old enough to be his mom. Also, I'm pretty sure I would have remembered giving birth.
That's an interesting story. It's wild how life can throw all those coincidences together. Meeting someone who shares that many connections is pretty rare. It must have been fun to piece it all together. Your mom's reaction makes sense though. It's a lot to take in. Glad you both found each other, no matter how distant the connections might be. Just goes to show that the universe has its own way of linking people.
Back when I was in the Army, I was sent to Fort Gordon, Georgia to learn a new MOS. I was running around base one day with a friend and noticed a female private with a hoodie that said patch on the back. I commented on it to my buddy and didn't think anything more of it. Fast forward about 9 months. After graduation, my next duty station was the Pentagon. I meet a girl there, we talk, end up hooking up, turns into dating. One day, she puts on her Army hoodie, and when she turns around, it says patch on the back. We have been married for 19 years yesterday.
That's a cool story. It's funny how things connect over time, right? You spot someone with a hoodie, and then later, you end up married to someone with the same one. It sounds like life has a way of bringing people together. Those little coincidences can be pretty significant. 19 years is a long time. It's nice to see how those moments shape relationships.
I lived exactly a mile away from my now husband throughout our entire childhoods, teenager years, and early adulthood before we'd even heard of each other and met. What's even stranger is when he was running, he'd know he'd ran 1 mile exactly when he got outside my house and would regularly stop and time himself. Edit 1. For people asking if the sex was good, I married him, didn't I? Winky face. Edit 2. The sex is still good, winky face.
That's a pretty interesting story. It's wild how close you can be to someone without knowing them. Running exactly a mile right outside your house is a nice connection. It's cool that you guys ended up together after all those years. And sounds like things are still going well for you both.
A few years ago, I was sitting enjoying some pints of beer outside on a corner of a pub. I saw 2 people, man and woman, arriving with their mobile at their ear and stopping on each side of the corner. They were talking on their mobile and could clearly see each other. The conversation went something like this. Dash, so where are you now? Dash, W, let me see at the corner of pub such and so. I see, I try to make it in half an hour or so. Dash, W, that would be great, I keep a chair for you. After this, the conversation went apart. These 2 people were not talking to each other and probably did not even know each other. It was a weird sensation, as if they were playing a joke or something.
That's an interesting scene. It's funny how technology can make people feel connected, yet create such a strange disconnect at the same time. They were just a few feet apart, but still chose to make a call instead. It feels like they missed out on a real moment together. I wonder if they ever realized how odd that was or if it just became a part of their routine.
I'm from Quebec, where our French has a very distinctive accent. It's very rare to hear it outside of the province, and my ears are super sensitive to it and pick it up quickly. I now work in Taiwan, and one day I hear someone behind me speak with a Quebecois accent, so I immediately turn around. Turn out to be someone I went to high school with.
That's pretty wild. Hearing a familiar accent in a place so far away must have been surreal. Running into someone from high school in Taiwan definitely adds to the story. It's interesting how small the world can feel sometimes. You probably had a lot to talk about, especially since both of you were far from home. Just a reminder of how connected we all can be, even miles apart.
I managed to bump into friends in a foreign country twice. Once it was in London in front of St. Paul's Cathedral, the other time in Palermo at night in front of a bar. Both times both of us were oblivious of the fact the other one was there too. And while it's probably not too weird to walk into somebody in Palermo, it's really not that big. Fucking London? We were pretty flabbergasted.
That's a wild coincidence. Running into friends like that can make you feel a bit connected while traveling. St. Paul's Cathedral and a bar in Palermo are pretty different vibes too. It's funny how you can be in completely different places and still cross paths. Makes you think about the randomness of life, I guess.
At a school dance in 9th grade, I spotted this insanely hot guy across the dance floor. My friend happened to know him and talked to him for me. She pointed me out to him, asked if he wanted to dance with me, and he did. We're slow dancing to some 90s song and get to talking about how we were kind of new to the school. Turns out we're both Army brats. Turns out that we both lived in upstate New York when we were little kids. Turns out we went to the same school. Turns out we were best friends in kindergarten. Fast forward, I shared my first kiss with him, unfortunately, at my going-away party a few weeks later since I was moving again. And we'll never forget it. Best coincidence ever.
That's a nice story. It's funny how things work out sometimes. Running into an old friend like that can be surprising, especially in a place like a dance. Sharing a kiss before moving away adds a bittersweet touch. It's like life has a way of tying connections together, even when you think you've lost them. You never really know who you'll meet again.
When I was a dumbass teenager in the 80s, we would drive around town at night in my friend's blue 66 Mustang and spray people with an old water fire extinguisher. Fast forward 10 years, and I'm selling a house. Our primary buyer, an older retired lady, backs out last minute. Our realtor drops by to tell my wife and I why. She explains that while waiting at our gate to be buzzed and some teenagers drove by and shot the old lady with an airsoft gun. Damn. She then continues, yeah, I don't know what's wrong with kids. When I first came to America 10 years ago, we were sitting at a bus stop when a group of boys in a nice blue car drove up smiling. When they got closer, they drenched us with some water spray. Edit. Second offer was for $20K more. Karma?
That's a wild story. It's funny how what seems like innocent fun as a kid can come back around in unexpected ways. That lady probably had her own memories from another time, and now she's got a connection to yours. Honestly, it feels like karma is just doing its thing, balancing everything out after all those years. Sometimes those memories come back to bite, but then you get a better offer too.
I lived in Eastern PA at the time and was visiting my sister in Seattle. We were at the alibi room having drinks, and two dudes sitting near us kept trying to engage us. We were kind of having none of it, sisters before misters that day. We left. Fast forward 9 years. I now live in Central PA, like 20 minutes from where my mom lives. I'm at a bar, recurring theme here it seems, talking to a friend about going to visit my sister in Seattle. The random dude next to us chimes in and starts talking about where I should go and what I should do. I used to live there, he said. It takes us a while to put together, but of course it's that dude from the alibi room. Of course. And of course, we learned 5 or 6 months later, he is the son of one of my mom's best friends. My mom has known him since he was a teenager. We're old now. And of course we're seeing each other now. I mean, it was practically woven into the fabric of the universe, you know?
That's an interesting twist for sure. Meeting that guy again after all those years is pretty wild. It's funny how life circles back sometimes. You're just trying to enjoy a drink with your sister, and then years later, you find yourself talking to him at a bar again. Plus, the connection with your mom's friend? That kind of feels like fate or something. Just goes to show how small the world can be.
I have a unisex name. Let's say it's Ashley. Anyway, I was at a nightclub and was talking to this girl. I asked her name, and she said it was Ash. And I said, haha, wear it. I'm Ash too. But what is your last name? She says Green. I just stare at her for like 10 seconds and reach into my wallet and pull out my ID. We have the same first and last name. Currently engaged.
That's a pretty strange coincidence. Meeting someone with the same name is one thing, but having the exact same full name is next level. It must have been a wild moment for both of you. I can only imagine how the conversation turned from surprise to something more meaningful. Now you're engaged too, which is a nice twist to the whole story. Life can be pretty unexpected sometimes.
A few years ago, I was in a hurry for some reason, I forget, and I had to run out in the rain to our shed to get something really quick. On my way, I dropped the key to the shed and couldn't find it because our grass was pretty long. I had spent several minutes scouring the ground in the rain, and in my annoyance, I thought something along the lines of, "Come on, God, help me out here." It wasn't really a prayer, even though I was Christian at the time, but suddenly the clouds parted a bit and the rain slowed down. I looked up and kind of laughed, thinking, great, now help me find the key. No shit, looked down and there the key was glinting in the sun right between my feet.
That's a funny story. It's crazy how things happen when you least expect it. Sometimes it feels like the universe has your back, even in small moments like that. Just running around in the rain, and then boom, there's the key. Makes you think about how some little things can turn your frustration into laughter. Pretty nice reminder that help can show up when you really need it.
My girlfriend has these two Bengal cats named Flynn and Sparta that always hop on the bed when we are hooking up. They get right in your face, and it's kind of annoying. Anyways, I was talking to my buddy from my class the other day, and he was talking about this chick he's been hooking up with who has these two annoying cats. And get this, they were also named Flynn and Sparta. What are the chances? Edit. Oh fuck. Fuck. Fuck fucking fuck. I'm so fucking stupid. It should be they are, not they were.
That's a funny coincidence with the cats having the same names. It must be kind of distracting when you're trying to do your thing and they jump on the bed. I can see how that would annoy you a bit. Talking to your buddy and finding out he has a similar situation just adds to the humor of it all. Makes for a good story though.
My junior year in high school, we had a transfer student come in from out of state. He immediately started hanging out with me and my friends. We lived together in college and worked together at many different restaurants and odd jobs. I was the best man at his wedding. Prior to transferring into our school, I had never heard of him or his family. As it would turn out, our mothers went to high school, not the same high school we attended, together and actually knew each other quite well. Our grandfathers built houses together back in the 1950s and knew each other very well. Now our children are friends. That's 4 generations linked by coincidence.
That's a cool story. It's interesting how some friendships form unexpectedly, just like that transfer student coming in and changing things up. The connection through family history makes it even wilder. It's like life is bringing things full circle with the kids being friends now. Just goes to show how small the world can be sometimes, and how people can end up intertwined in ways you don't even realize.
This is too low to be seen, but what the hell? When I was about 20, I was in a car accident. This girl T-boned my new car. We exchanged information, and it turned out we were both born on the exact same date. I asked her where she was from, and she came from the same small city I did, 1,000 miles away, and was living 2 blocks from my apartment. Even our initials were the same. It was like I collided with myself from an alternate gender universe. I never saw her again.
That's kind of wild. You have this experience of a random accident, but then you find out you have so much in common with this person. It makes you think about how small the world can be sometimes. Just a brief moment that could have led to something interesting, but it didn't happen. It's strange how life throws these coincidences your way.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.